Zlatan stole to survive as a kid, from bike thief to superstar. Hook 1. The confession that shocked football. I stole to survive. I did things I'm not proud of, but I had to eat. I had to live. Those words came from Zlatan Ibrahimović, one of the most successful footballers of his generation. A man who's earned over $500 million in his career. A man who drives Ferraris and lives in mansions. But before all of that, he was a kid in the rough neighborhoods of Malmö, Sweden, stealing bikes just to get by. This isn't a redemption story, this is a survival story. This is about a boy who grew up in poverty, surrounded by crime, living in a broken home, who used his fists and his feet to escape a life that was trying to swallow him whole. And what he became is almost unbelievable. The Rosengård Ghetto. Let's start at the beginning. Zlatan Ibrahimović was born in 1981 in Rosengård, a neighborhood in Malmö that was, and still is, one of the toughest areas in Sweden. This wasn't the Sweden that tourists visit. This was immigrant Sweden, poor Sweden, forgotten Sweden. Zlatan's father, Shafiq, was a Bosnian Muslim who came to Sweden looking for work. His mother, Jurka, was a Croatian Catholic. They met, fell in love, and had Zlatan and his siblings. But love doesn't pay bills, and it doesn't heal trauma. Shafiq was an alcoholic. He worked when he could, but mostly he drank. The family lived in a small apartment in a housing project where crime was normal, violence was common, and poverty was everywhere. Zlatan grew up surrounded by immigrants like him, people from the Balkans, the Middle East, Africa, all trying to survive in a country that didn't quite know what to do with them. Hook 2. The childhood nobody talks about. Zlatan's parents separated when he was 2 years old. That's when things got really hard. His mother couldn't afford to feed 5 children on her own. She worked cleaning jobs, night shifts, anything she could find, but it was never enough. Zlatan has described going to bed hungry, wearing the same clothes day after day because there was no money for new ones, watching his mother cry because she couldn't provide for her kids. That kind of poverty doesn't just hurt your stomach, it hurts your soul. School was a nightmare. Zlatan was different. He had a foreign name. His parents spoke broken Swedish. He looked different, acted different. Other kids bullied him. Teachers wrote him off as a troublemaker. He was hyperactive, angry, couldn't focus. Nobody understood that he was just a kid dealing with chaos at home and prejudice everywhere else. So he fought. A lot. He got into fights with other kids, with older kids, with anyone who disrespected him. Fighting became his language. Violence became his way of asserting control in a life where he had none. The bike thefts begin. This is where the stealing started. Zlatan needed money. His mother had none. His father was useless. So he did what a lot of kids in his neighborhood did. He started stealing bikes. It wasn't organized crime. It wasn't sophisticated. Zlatan would see a nice bike, wait until nobody was looking, and take it. Then he'd sell it for whatever he could get. Maybe 100 kroner, maybe 200, enough to buy food, enough to feel like he had something. He's admitted in interviews that he stole a lot of bikes. He doesn't give exact numbers, but the way he talks about it, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a survival strategy that lasted months, maybe years. In his autobiography, I Am Zlatan, he writes, "I stole a lot. I'm not proud of it, but I had to survive. Nobody was helping us. Nobody cared if we ate or not, so I did what I had to do." Hook 3. The criminal path he almost took. Zlatan was on a path that leads a lot of kids in Rosengård to prison or worse. He was running with older kids who were into serious crime, drugs, robbery, violence. He was becoming exactly what society expected him to become, another immigrant kid who never made it out. He's talked about how close he came to that life, how easy it would have been to keep stealing, to escalate to bigger crimes, to end up dead or in jail by 20. In Rosengård, that was the normal trajectory. That was what happened to kids like him. But Zlatan had one thing that saved him: football. He was good at it, really good. And more importantly, football gave him a place to channel all that anger, all that aggression, all that desperate energy that was eating him alive. He played in the streets, on concrete, with whatever ball he could find. He played with immigrant kids, Swedish kids, older kids, anyone. And he was always the best. Always. Even as a little kid, people could see he had something special. The father who failed him. Zlatan's relationship with his father is one of the most painful parts of his story. Shafiq was physically present sometimes, but emotionally absent always. He drank. He gambled. He disappeared for days. When Zlatan started showing promise in football, his father would occasionally show up to games, but only occasionally. And when he did show up, he was often drunk or critical or both. He never gave Zlatan the validation he desperately needed. Zlatan has said that his father's absence and alcoholism shaped everything about who he became. The chip on his shoulder, the need to prove himself, The arrogance that people see as ego, but is really just armor against a world that told him he wasn't good enough. In one heartbreaking moment, Zlatan recalls buying his father a car when he made it as a professional footballer. Not because his father deserved it, but because Zlatan needed to prove that he had made it, despite everything his father failed to give him. His father barely thanked him. Hook 4. The football escape. At 13, Zlatan joined Malmö FF's youth academy. This was his ticket out, but even there he didn't fit in. The other kids were mostly Swedish, middle class. They had parents who drove them to practice and bought them proper boots and encouraged them. Zlatan showed up in borrowed boots. His mother couldn't afford to drive him, so he took the bus or walked. He looked different, acted different, talked different. The coaches didn't know what to make of him. He was incredibly talented, but also incredibly undisciplined. He'd try impossible tricks, he'd argue with coaches, he'd get into fights with teammates. He was raw talent wrapped in street attitude, and the Swedish football system didn't know how to handle that. Multiple times, coaches almost gave up on him. They thought he was too difficult, too arrogant, too much trouble. But one coach, a man who understood where Zlatan came from, kept fighting for him, kept telling the club that this kid was special, that you had to accept the rough edges to get the brilliance. The stealing continues. Even as Zlatan was rising through Malmö's youth ranks, the stealing didn't stop immediately. He was still poor. His family was still struggling. Football didn't pay anything at youth level. He's described sneaking into stadiums without paying, stealing food from shops, taking things he needed because he couldn't afford to buy them. The desperation of poverty doesn't disappear just because you're good at football, not until you actually start making money from it. It wasn't until Zlatan signed his first professional contract at 17 that the financial pressure eased. That first paycheck, finally, legitimate money. Money he earned, money nobody could take away. Money that meant he didn't have to steal anymore. Hook 5. The racism he faced. Being an immigrant in Sweden in the 1990s was hard. Being a cocky immigrant kid who was better than the Swedish kids was harder. Zlatan faced racism constantly. Opponents called him Gypsy, Yugoslav, and worse. Fans threw things at him. Even some teammates made comments about his background. Swedish football at that time wasn't diverse. It wasn't welcoming to people who looked and acted like Zlatan. This racism fueled him. Every slur made him more determined. Every insult made him train harder. He's said that he played angry, that he wanted to humiliate the people who looked down on him, that every goal was a middle finger to everyone who thought an immigrant kid from the ghetto couldn't make it. That anger became his superpower. It made him fearless. It made him willing to try things other players wouldn't dare. It made him into Zlatan. The breakthrough at Ajax. At 20, Zlatan moved to Ajax in the Netherlands. This was his first big move, his first chance to prove himself outside Sweden, and he almost blew it. He struggled at first. The Dutch game was faster, more technical. He clashed with coaches. He had attitude problems. Ajax almost sent him back to Sweden. But then something clicked. Zlatan started dominating. He scored incredible goals, he embarrassed defenders, he became Ajax's best player. And the world started to notice that this kid from the Swedish ghetto was something special. The bike thief from Rosengard was becoming a superstar. Hook 6. The rise to superstardom. From Ajax, Zlatan moved to Juventus, then Inter Milan, then Barcelona, then AC Milan, then Paris Saint-Germain, then Manchester United, then LA Galaxy, then back to AC Milan. He conquered every league he played in, Serie A, La Liga, Ligue 1, the Premier League. He scored over 500 career goals. He won 31 trophies. He played for the biggest clubs in the world and was the star at almost all of them. But he never forgot where he came from. He never stopped being the kid from Rosengard. The chip on his shoulder never went away. The anger never fully left. The arrogance explained. People call Zlatan arrogant. He calls himself a god. He talks in third person. He says things like, "I came like a king, left like a legend," when he left the LA Galaxy. He's ego personified. But when you understand his background, the arrogance makes sense. This is a kid who was told his entire childhood that he was nothing, that he'd amount to nothing, that immigrant kids from ghettos don't become football stars. Every arrogant statement is a response to those voices. Every time he calls himself the best, he's arguing with the bullies, the racists, the coaches who doubted him, the father who failed him, the poverty that tried to keep him down. It's not arrogance, it's defiance, it's survival. It's a boy who stole bikes to eat telling the world, "Look at me now." What he did with his money. When Zlatan started making serious money, he took care of his mother first, bought her a house, made sure she never had to clean another toilet or work another night shift. That was non-negotiable. He's also given back to Rosengard in ways that don't always make headlines. He's funded sports programs for immigrant kids. He's donated equipment. He's talked openly about his background to show other kids from similar situations that escape is possible. But he's also lived large. Ferraris, mansions, designer clothes. And why shouldn't he? He came from nothing. He earned everything. Why shouldn't he enjoy it? The bike thief drives Ferraris now, and there's justice in that. The father's death. Shafiq Ibrahimović died in 2019. Zlatan didn't attend the funeral. That tells you everything about their relationship. In interviews after his father's death, Zlatan has been honest about his feelings. No fake sentiment, no pretending they had a relationship they didn't, just truth. He was my father biologically, but he was never there for me. I had to become who I am in spite of him, not because of him. That kind of honesty is rare. Most people pretend. Zlatan never does. The kid who had to steal to survive doesn't waste time on comfortable lies. Hook 8, the legacy. Zlatan is 42 now. He retired from professional football in 2023 after a final stint at AC Milan. His body finally gave out after decades of elite performance. But his story lives on. He's written books, made documentaries, become a global icon. His statue stands in Malmö, though it's been vandalized multiple times by fans who didn't like that he bought shares in a rival club. Even in retirement, controversy follows him. But more importantly, he's proof that your circumstances don't define your destiny. That a kid from a ghetto can become a king. That stealing bikes doesn't mean you're destined for prison. That anger and trauma can be channeled into greatness. The uncomfortable truth. Here's the part people don't like to admit. Zlatan's success doesn't mean the system works. He's the exception, not the rule. For every kid from Rosengard who becomes Zlatan, 1,000 don't make it out. They end up in prison. They end up dead. They end up stuck in the same poverty their parents lived in. Zlatan succeeded because of extraordinary talent, incredible drive, and honestly, some luck. The right coaches noticed him. The right opportunities came at the right time. He had the physical gifts to play football at the highest level. Most kids in his situation don't have those advantages. They're just as smart, just as tough, just as determined. But they don't have a way out, and society fails them. Hook 9. The message to kids like him. Zlatan has said in interviews that if his story inspires even one kid to keep fighting, to stay out of serious crime, to pursue their dreams, then everything he went through was worth it. He speaks at schools in immigrant neighborhoods. He tells kids, "I was you. I stole. I fought. I was angry at the world. But I found something I was good at, and I worked harder than everyone else. You can too. Your background doesn't have to be your destiny." Whether that message gets through depends on the kid. Some will hear it and change their path. Others won't. But at least he's trying. At least he's not pretending he came from privilege. The final transformation. From bike thief to superstar, from Rosengard to the biggest stages in world football, from poverty to hundreds of millions of dollars, from anger to confidence, from survival to dominance. Zlatan Ibrahimovic's journey is almost too dramatic to believe. If he wrote it as fiction, people would say it's unrealistic. But it's all true. He stole to survive. He fought to protect himself. He played football to escape. And he became one of the greatest players of his generation through sheer force of will and talent. The bikes he stole as a kid are a footnote in an incredible story. But they're an important footnote. They remind us where he came from. They remind us what he overcame. They remind us that greatness doesn't always come from privilege and support and perfect circumstances. Sometimes it comes from the ghetto. Sometimes it comes from poverty and pain. Sometimes it comes from a kid who had to steal just to eat, who channeled all that desperation and anger into becoming something extraordinary. Zlatan didn't just survive, he conquered. And every time he scored a goal, every time he lifted a trophy, every time he called himself a god, he was sending a message back to Rosengard, back to the poverty, back to everyone who counted him out. I made it. Despite everything, I made it. And he did it his way, unapologetically, loudly, with his middle finger raised to everyone who doubted him, from bike thief to superstar, from nothing to everything. That's not just Zlatan's story. That's the story of what's possible when talent meets desperation, when anger meets opportunity, when a kid decides that survival isn't enough, he wants to win.